Okay, so this morning I want to share with you something that hopefully we'll be able to see because the projector went to sleep while we were talking. So we'll wait for that to come on. But I want to talk a little bit about a book I read a little while ago. We're talking about books that we're reading. Right now, in case you're wondering, I'm reading a book on Franklin Roosevelt's first 100 days in office back in 1932. Fascinating read. Perhaps that'll be a topic for another day. But when Tim and, almost said Tim and Alvin, it's Matt and Alvin now, first asked me to share this morning, I said to him, well, the only thing that's really been rattling around in my head is this book I read a while ago called The Art of War, written by a guy named Sun Tzu, or something. I'm not Chinese, so I don't know how to say that properly, but a couple thousand years ago. And I want to just talk this morning a little about the art of war. My subtitle for this is Yesterday's Wisdom for Today's Battlefield. And for those of you who are new to ministry, you may not realize this yet, or maybe you already do, because if you're in a church, you probably recognize that the church is a battlefield. And I know that's a little raw, and we don't like to talk about church quite in those contexts, but if you've been in ministry for any length of time, you'll know it's a battlefield. I myself have been in ministry for 17 years now, 7 at my current church and 10 at various churches prior to that. And I carry various scars from the battle. I have been fired by a church. I've gone through highs and lows, and I wanted to come this morning and just talk about how do you survive the battles? How do you survive? How can you learn? See if we get this going in the right direction. The art, okay, I could just push that button, of war. Did I turn this off again?
It might have.
Yeah, we're good. I got it. So, how do we learn the art of war? I'll just talk from over here. I'm fascinated by war. I'm a guy, obviously. I love the concept of war. Braveheart, one of my favorite movies of all time, the fight for freedom. How do we ensure that we're battling for people's freedom? Wouldn't inspire me? I cry every time I see the end of that movie. His hand opens up. It's very sad. Gladiator, another war movie that I find fascinating. The fight for righting a wrong. This guy had his family killed, and he was out to set it straight. I cry at the end of this movie, too, when they're like, he was a soldier of Rome, honor him. I'm like, that's the way I want to die. I want to preach a message. I want to die right there in front of my church and have the elders stand up and go, he was a pastor of our church, honor him. And they'll carry me down the center aisle. It's true. I've told people that before. I really want to, well, you know, never mind. Top Gun, who doesn't want to fight against the communists so that our political ideology. I like this movie mostly because I wanted to fly the plane. I didn't want to fight the communists. But anyways, video games. We do war against ghosts and cherries and other stuff. And I love Pac-Man. Just played a human game of Pac-Man with my youth the other day. It's always a good time. I've declared war on various insects like this guy. Hate mosquitoes, we're good. Moving on. And I've declared war on food. If you've ever seen Man vs. Food, it is a war out there sometimes. This is a 5-pound gummy bear. 6,600 calories. It's 3 days worth of food. One of these days I will eat that at a single meal. So.
And you will die.
Possibly, and if I do it right there in front of the church, I can have multiple battles can come to an end at the same moment in time. That would be fantastic. So here we are at the start of our Happy Youth Leader Ministries. I know some of you are senior pastors, but we'll just talk more generically this morning. This was me, well, sort of. I'm not quite as pixelated in real life. But started off this idyllic dream of youth ministry. This is going to be rosy and great. I've got all these great event ideas and all these great plans and things I wanted to do. And things were good for the first 6 months. And then I had the wake-up call. Big fish jumped up and tried to eat me. The big fish at the time actually was the father of one of my youth who happened to be the chair of our elders board. And I had done something that I should never have done, and that was discipline his child. But anyways, in that specific context, we won't get into that. What I want to talk about is that there comes a point in your ministry when you will encounter opposition. You will encounter somebody who is going to try to tear you down. You're going to encounter the battle that is the church. So how do you survive? Again, going through the ancient wisdom of Sun Tzu, the first thing we have to recognize, and this is what he said, war is inevitable. It is the ground of death and life, the path of survival and destruction. It is imperative to examine it. So if you don't recognize that war will come to you someday, you're already off to a bad start. You have to recognize from the beginning that there will be a moment where you'll have this wake-up call. Most of you have probably been there already. You may be in the middle of a battle. You may be at the tail end of it, hoping somebody will put you to death soon so you can get on with other things. But somewhere in there, we're in this realization that war is inevitable. The first thing you have to do to survive the battlefield, church, is lay plans. It is essential that you plan for war, that you plan what you're going to do, that you move forward with what Sun Tzu calls the 5 things that you have to recognize. There are 5 things you need to measure if you want to survive on the battlefield of war. The first is the way. The way is simply the people, bringing people along so they have the same goal and vision as you. When you do that, Sun Tzu says, when you do that, they are willing to share life and death with you without the fear of danger. And I've been told a long time ago, a leader with nobody following is just out for a walk. So step 1 is making sure that everybody is with you, that you're all moving in one direction. Because otherwise, you're out for a walk and you're going to get blown up and everyone's going to go, did you just see that? That was funny. Number 2 is the weather. Churches go through seasons. If you've been in ministry long enough, you know there's a cycle to what happens in church. Churches go through seasons. It's a bad idea for you to go to your board of finance or board of management and say, I need $1,000 to put a big screen TV up in the youth room when you're in the middle of cutting your budget. It's a bad plan. It's a bad time. It's a bad season. You have to make sure that whatever it is you want to do, whether it's mission trips, whether, again, it's renovating or buying a car, whatever it is, you've got to make sure that your church is in the right season, or you're going to set yourself off for a war that you're not ready to deal with. Third thing he talks about is the terrain, the distance you have to travel. How hard is it to get to where you want to go? What's it going to take to get there? What do you have to climb over on your path? And this is something I learn all the time. Every time I play Halo or Call of Duty with my youth, yes, I know, video games are evil, I understand that. I play them all the time with our youth because it's the only way to get some of the guys out to my house. Every time I play it, I learn the importance of terrain. I get my butt kicked. And it's always because I'm standing behind a wall and I get shot out of nowhere, and one of the guys is like, I'm like, where were you? Well, if you go down that hill and around the corner, there's this tower you can climb up, and on the other side you can see down to blow people up. I didn't know that. I don't know the terrain of the game, right? So, partially because I don't own the game and my kids are too young and my wife would yell if I let them play it with me. But anyways, if you don't know the terrain, you're going to get blindsided by stuff coming out of places you never thought to look. The fourth thing you've got to look at is leadership. Sun Tzu says leadership is a matter of intelligence, trustworthiness, humaneness, courage, and sternness. You have to ask yourself the question, do you qualify as a leader? Do you have courage? Do you have intelligence? Do you have sternness? Secondly, do your volunteers qualify? Thirdly, are the leaders you're working under qualified? Like, are you on the same page as them? You have to make sure your leadership is up to the task. And the last thing he talks about in preparing is discipline, meaning the organization, the chain of command, and all the logistics. Youth pastors are notoriously bad at administration. And it's the #1 place where youth pastors fail, is when they do bad at administration, they don't see the blind stuff coming up. They don't plan effectively, and in the end, they die. And this is what Sun Tzu goes on to say. Every general has heard these 5 things. Those who know them prevail. Those who do not know them do not prevail. Pretty simple. He says, a general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple before he ever goes out to fight. The general who loses a battle makes few calculations. And his big summation is, thus do many calculations lead to victory, few calculations lead to failure. How much more so is not making any calculation at all. So step 1 in surviving the battlefield of the church is making sure that you are doing your work in laying plans and preparing yourself for whatever it is you're trying to do. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Are you ready for the opposition that may come? Step 2 in surviving. Waging war. Again, war is going to eventually come to you. This is an inevitability. Somebody will say, I don't like that you did that. I accidentally made the mistake of letting our youth drink pop and watch a movie while eating popcorn on a brand new carpet in our sanctuary. Bad idea. I set myself up for failure. I didn't think it through. I didn't think, hey, look, new carpet, let's go and get it dirty. That was not a good idea. So what does he say about fighting in the actual battle? One of the things that wisdom comes down from the art of war is this. A long, drawn-out battle isn't good for anybody. Nobody survives a long, drawn-out battle. But what I mean by that is, if you're going to go into a battle, you've decided this is something I think is worthy of doing. If it's going to cause you to battle against your leaders and your parents and your youth for X number of months or years, is it even worth it? Maybe by the end of that battle, you'll be so burned out that even though you win it, you're not going to have anything left to move forward. I heard Jim Collins talk a little while ago about the race to the South Pole, and Americans raced against some Norwegians. And the Americans, one of the reasons they lost is they spent so much energy, expended so much time trying to get there, they didn't have the resources to get back home, and they ended up dying on the return trip. They made what they wanted to accomplish, but they had nothing left to come back. It's an important thing to realize is you pick your battles wisely, because sometimes it's not worth getting to the goal only to realize you can't make it back. What are you actually willing to die for is another thing to consider when you're waging war, is when you're putting your flag in the ground and you're saying, this is what I'm going to do, is it really worth dying for? Is it worth dying for that you think the church should have one more contemporary piece of music on a Sunday morning? Is it worth getting fired over that, or is it worth just saying, hey, we'll work this out together? And the final thing I want to share about waging war is this. It's a fascinating concept that I'd never really even thought of. Sun Tzu says, the ruler is powerful because he is at the head of a complex set of relationships. By contrast, personal strength, I can zoom in here for you if you want to see that. By contrast, personal strength, morality, and abilities are qualities that belong only to the individual. They are ineffective unless conjoined with a larger pattern of influence. All he means there is what you've heard before. Great teams create success. Your strengths, your abilities, anything you can do is fine and dandy, but if you're out of the picture, will your ministry survive? We went through a period of time last year when my son was born and had a stroke where I was away from the ministry for 8 weeks. And if I hadn't created a team of leaders around me, what would my ministry have done? Well, they would have just had to wait for me to come back. And where's the victory in that? Where's the success? So when you're planning ahead and you're waging war, you make sure that you have a strong leadership team around you. And thirdly, my favorite aspect of ministry, the attack by fire. Look at this guy. I actually honestly think that's a parent I worked with once. I can remember once this mother walked into my office and she pointed at me and she said, "You are sending our kids to hell in a handbasket." And I went, "Huh, what? I didn't realize I did that. I'm sorry. I'll get them on another bus and we'll send them in a different direction." But the point is, there will come a moment in time when somebody is going to blast you and it's going to come out of left field and you're not going to expect it. How do you survive in these times? What do you need to do to make sure that when you get steamrolled, that you don't blow up and cause even more harm? A couple of thoughts to help you through this time. Number one is this. Sun Tzu says a government should not mobilize an army out of anger. Military leaders should not provoke war out of wrath. Act when it is beneficial, desist when it is not. Sometimes when you get blown up and somebody yells at you and you get screamed at and the deacon's board calls you in and says, blah, 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 didn't like this, 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 and this. I had that meeting 4 months ago. Our senior pastor said, some people are coming in to talk to you in about 5 minutes. Now you can choose to either listen or you can get really mad. And fortunately, I chose to listen. Because sometimes these things just come out of nowhere. And Sun Tzu says, if you try to respond out of anger, you're going to blow yourself up and you're going to take yourself down. So never, ever act out of anger when somebody comes at you and it's out of left field. Secondly, he talks about use cymbals, drums, banners, and flags to focus and unify people's ears. I can move in on this as well. Once people are unified, the brave cannot proceed alone, the timid cannot retreat alone. Sometimes people like to make noise in churches. They like to stand up in business meetings and raise all sorts of issues that have nothing to do with anything. What you need to do is find ways to bang your drum or raise banners. In war, they use these symbols to help keep people's eyes focused on what's really going on and not the commotion around them. And if you can learn to capture people's attention and to hold their attention, regardless of the commotion other people are trying to bring at you, you can keep moving forward because these people will be focused on you. What will you do when you are attacked to help keep people looking at you? And this is the final thing he says. Use order to deal with the disorderly. Use calm to deal with the clamorous. That is mastering the heart. It's an old biblical proverb too. You know, sometimes when people come at you in wrath, you very calmly say, I appreciate what you're saying. I will move forward. And if you're very calm and quiet, you can actually capture them and turn them around in the other direction. And finally, the last thing I want to share as we're running out of time here is about the pot of gold, Spies. My favorite chapter of his entire book was about spies. Now, I should make a disclaimer that I don't believe in everything Sun Tzu talks about, so I'm just trying to take some nuggets out of it. So if you go through it and you're like, he talks about how war is based on deception, please don't listen to him. Well, listen to me, I guess, but whatever. So, spies are your pot of gold in surviving the battle of war. And who are your spies? It is important. This is what he says. Unless you use local guides, you cannot get the advantages of the land. As a youth pastor, I recognize that I work with several different groups. I work with my volunteer leaders, I work with youth, I work with parents, and I work with church leaders. And if I don't have people within each of those groups that I can go to find out what's going on in the lives of those different groups, I'll fail. He says, if you don't know the plans of your competitors, you cannot make informed alliances or decisions. You can't find the reason behind a parent's anger simply by sitting in your office and staring at your wall and hoping that the book on the wall will tell you why Patty's mad at you for whatever happened Friday night. You have to go out and talk to people and find out from those individuals what's going on here. For a very brief example, I sat down with a group of students 3 months ago who were trying to get me fired because they thought I was the dumbest youth pastor on the planet. And it turned out it all came down to one girl. But I had to talk to my spies, for lack of a better term, to find out who was actually the issue so I could go to her and actually quell the issue. And it turned out she was upset over the fact that we split her and another girl up on a mission trip 6 years ago, and she was still mad about it. And I was like, really, that's it? But you see, when you take the time to go to your spies and find out what's really happening, you can get to the heart of the matter, and you can get it figured out. So this is what I want to leave you with at the very end of this. The rule of military operations is not to count on opponents not coming, double negative, but you get the point, but to rely on having ways of dealing with them. Not to count on opponents not attacking, but to rely on having what cannot be attacked. You have to plan for the battlefield. If you don't, you will suffer. So I want to leave you with this very thought. The next time you feel like taking an Uzi to your church business meetings, consider this. Have you forgotten the art of war? Thank you.